This sub has gotten me through a lot of boredom and has provided me with hours of entertainment. I figure it's my turn to tell my revenge story. So it's been about 4 years since this happened. I was about 18 at the time, working for a security company. There were constant call-offs and no-shows. Have no idea why. But being so young and naive, I was constantly working 16-hour shifts and not coming home until 8 AM. Also, I lived with my father at the time. The time frame of this was around the 4th of July. I finally had a day off, and my best friend was back in town for vacation. We decided to get together and chip in on some good old American fireworks. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different. We got home with the fireworks, and we laid them all out on the floor. Sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. I say, why don't we mess around with some sparklers, since it's still not dark yet? Great idea. We go into my backyard, where it hasn't rained in well over 2 months, and it is extremely dry. You see the problem here? One of the little sparkers from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and made it to small fires that quickly spread to a large area. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was no use. It was spreading faster than I could spray it. I handed my friend the hose and called 911. What felt like hours was only 4 minutes and the fire was spreading to the neighbor's fence. The neighbor came outside and they were fairly calm to grab their hose and spray down the fence along with the dead grass in her yard. The fire department shows up finally and I tell my friend only one of us needs to get in trouble. You should leave. He was reluctant to leave because he felt equally responsible, but I convinced him. I didn't want him to get in trouble and have to drop out of college. My neighbor was super chill about the entire situation at first. I told her that we could talk about replacing the fence and get some quotes to repair it. She was just super grateful that everyone was okay. About 2 hours after the fire, the arson fire investigator came to question me about the fire. I told him the truth. I said I was in the backyard by myself playing with fireworks and accidentally lit the ground on fire. I had gotten off that day without being hit by any charges and was commended for being honest. Here is where it goes downhill very fast. About a week later, I get a knock on the door from the neighbor. I opened the door and she handed me 2 pieces of paper for me to look at. There was a quote for the fence valued at around $4,000 and an estimate for lawn care valued around $6,000. These were really shady and just typed out on a Microsoft Word document. No logo or company name. She then adds, I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water. Now the fence this woman had before was raggedy and falling apart. Her yard? Dead grass, weeds everywhere, never mowed it. Now looking at this paper, she wants a mahogany fence and a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges. I said I need to get an estimate myself. This doesn't feel right. She says, remember you agreed to replace my fence and a real man keeps promises. I shut the door and called my dad to tell him about what just happened. He flipped the F out and told me, son, don't you give that slut a single dime. He gives me the number to his handyman and tells me to take care of it. The next day I had the guy come out for an estimate and the neighbor ran outside flailing her arms. I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence. Technically it separates the property line, so it's both of our fences. She calls the cops on me for having a contractor and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property. He quickly finishes the estimate off at $1,200. I also knew a guy who did lawn care from my time working at the grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. After I get these estimates, I give copies to the woman and she is having none of it. I don't know these people, I don't want them near my house. They're probably really crappy contractors. I said no, I know them personally, they are really nice people and do great work. She shut the door in my face and I went on my way. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night and got home at 8 AM. And this woman comes knocking on my door at 9 AM and demanded I speak to her. I explained I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep. She goes, what kind of lazy shat sleeps in until 2 PM? At this point I had about lost it and told her you can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or kiss my butt and get nothing. She stood there for a while with her mouth gaped open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning. I spent that night, after I got off work, writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. The next morning I wake up and grab this contract to meet down at the notary. I was thrilled to finally be done with this broad and never speak to her again. I waited for her for over 3 hours and she didn't show up. I get a call from her saying I'm sorry the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project and you will be paying me full price. Oh really? After that I did not say a single word to her and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod and flowers, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out she had plans to remodel these things for a long time and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Also in this time, she used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group and didn't know I was in it. I have a different Facebook name than my real name. Are you ready for the revenge? Now 4 months after the fire and all the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case. When we finally do get into court I lay everything out. The quotes, being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law BTW, and her bragging about screwing me out of money, and I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, "Mom, with all due respect, you're out of your daggum mind. Not only did this young man tell the truth of what happened, he offered to pay you more than he was supposed to. Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred, therefore he is only responsible for the fence of $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees, $800. So I burned this woman's fence down, and all I'm having to give her is $400? Cool." She took a huge financial loss from this. Not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. Haven't heard anything from her since. So I need to keep this somewhat vague to maintain anonymity, and I wasn't there for all of it. This mostly happened to my friend, who was one of the employees screwed over. But I did what I could to help my friend get revenge. Friend of mine was employed as a barista for a coffee shop with a couple of locations. Well, the owner turned out to be a grade A scumbag. Started paying the employees with bad checks, not giving them their tips if they were paid on a credit card. Obviously he couldn't steal their cash tips, not that he didn't try, things along those lines. He was, of course, stealing from the business to fund his own lavish lifestyle. My friend was pissed and quit shortly after this nonsense started, and of course the business shortly went under. But if that's all that happened, this wouldn't fit in ProRevenge. Now, my friend was out a few $1,000s. I'm not sure exactly how much, but enough that it was a serious hit to their budget. And they weren't the only one. This creep was the classic con man, writing checks to cover the bad checks, all the delay tactics you ever see. Oh, the bank must have messed up, just redeposit it, and of course it comes back as a bad check a week or 2 later. Lots of shady stuff. But he was a good con man. All told, 8 people were getting screwed over too. I found out later, in excess of $20k. So one afternoon, my friend is telling me this story. How he's so sick and tired of being conned by this creep, as well as everyone else. And here is where the ProRevenge part begins to come into effect. I start digging into the business owner. All public record stuff, and some of it I learned from my friend or their coworkers. But started to learn a lot about this scumbag. 1. He's got multiple felonies in his past. I'm all for giving people a second chance, but this guy wasn't that old and had racked up easily a half-dozen felonies. Why he wasn't still in jail is a topic for a much different forum. 2. One of his convictions was for being a felon in possession of a firearm. 3. He was currently on probation for the above conviction. This is where things start getting interesting. a little more like digging, and I come up with the name of his probation officer. When I sat and talked to my friend about what I had found out about his prior employer, 2 cycles of bounce checks was enough. He happened to mention that he had seen firearms in his apartment. They'd hung out together socially before things went completely pear-shaped. He'd used his girlfriend to purchase firearms, since he was a prohibited person. Straw purchase, yet another felony. So now as things get really interesting, I put my friend in contact with Scumbag's probation officer. Turns out when you are out on probation, there's a lot of things you're not allowed to do. One of them is commit more felonies. This is an automatic revocation of your probation, and will land your happy little butt back in jail. Oh, and knowingly passing bad checks in our state for the amount he was writing them for is a felony in and of itself. 8 employees, 3 payroll cycles, before the business officially went belly up. 23 felony counts of passing a bad check, since my buddy bailed at 2 cycles. Repeat offense of being a felon in possession of a firearm. As if that's not bad enough, when his probation officer came a knocking to check on these allegations, he also found drug paraphernalia and drugs sufficient to get him for possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute multiple different drugs, so multiple counts of that too. For those keeping score at home, if he was convicted of all of these counts, he would be looking at roughly an additional 30 felonies. Easily enough to keep him in jail for a very long time. Now, if this were petty revenge, that's where things would have stopped. But no. You see, the state has this fund that all employers pay a tax into. It's a fund for those situations where the company goes out of business, writes bad checks for their employees, etc. And it's administered by the state labor board. So they pay out to cover the lost wages, but not the lost tips, of the employees. But the state is not benevolent in this. Oh no. You see, in order to attempt to recoup their losses, they can seize company assets. And in the case of a poorly set up company with no separation of assets between the company and the owner, they can also seize personal assets. Oh yes, that shiny new company truck that you're towing your shiny new boat with, guess what, scumbag? They now belong to the state. Your bank accounts? Yeah, those belong to the state now too. Now surely, you must be thinking, surely this is now pro-revenge, right? Oh no. You see, this scumbag messed with my friend. And I don't take kindly to that kind of nonsense. You see, my friend learned throughout this process that on top of all this, his former employer was committing tax fraud evasion. As far as the employees were concerned, they were all straight up W4 employees, meaning he was withholding the correct taxes, payroll taxes, Medicare taxes, etc. Except he was reporting to the eyes that all of his employees were independent contractors, and wasn't actually withholding any taxes at all. Taxes for the company? He was fudging those so badly they should have been sold as brownies. Unfortunately for Scumbag, a friend of a friend happened to work for the local ICE office, and after sitting with him over drinks one evening, found out that the ICE has a tip line for reporting tax evasion. And depending on how it's reported, well, turns out that the person reporting the tax evasion may actually get a small percentage as a reward for turning in the tax cheat. So on top of facing 30 some odd felony charges, on top of having all his personal and company assets seized, Scumbag now has the ICE chasing after him. That, dear readers, is pro-revenge. Thank you for watching. Slap that like button and comment your opinion on these stories below. I'm waiting. Write that comment. Seriously. Have you written it yet? If you don't comment, you make a bunny cry somewhere. You're not that kind of person. I know. Anyways, peace out and catch you tomorrow.